The Cathedral of Bound Moons had stood for 9 centuries, and in all that time, no betrayal had ever crossed its silver threshold. Marin Vosserel knelt in the alcove behind the third western pillar, her wedding gown crushed beneath her, and watched the man she was meant to marry destroy her in front of 2,000 witnesses. 10,000 candles burned along the walls, each blessed by the Sisters of the Pale Light, each flame holding perfectly still as if the ceremony itself had stopped time. The packlords of all 4 quarters had come, the merchant princes of the river cities, the frost wardens from the high passes, even the council of elder mothers, who had not left their sanctuary in 30 years, sat in the front row in their gray robes, hands folded over carved bone staves. She had spent 4 years preparing for this night. The dress alone had taken her grandmother's seamstress 9 months to embroider. 300 mountain pearls glittered in the bodice. The veil was woven from the silk of cloud spiders that lived only on the cliffs above her family's estate. She had been told from the cradle that she would marry Caithon Dravarin, heir to the Silverhold throne. Instead, she crouched in the shadows like a thief, watching her future given to another woman. The girl on the dais was perhaps 19. Dark river water hair, bare feet on cold marble, as if she had been pulled from somewhere humble and untouched. She wore a simple white shift the priests had given her, and her eyes held the dazed wonder of someone who had just been told she was a goddess. Caithon stood beside her, holding her wrist as if afraid she might dissolve. "The mark has spoken," the high priest declared, his voice rolling through the vaulted ceiling. "The bond between Alpha Caithon Dravarin and the woman known as Cyrith of the Reedlands is true and unbreakable. The pale light has chosen, and no mortal vow may stand against it." A murmur swept the cathedral. Marin pressed a hand to her mouth. An hour ago, she had been in the bridal chamber, having the final pin set into her veil. An hour ago, her mother had wept with joy and kissed her forehead. An hour ago, Caithon had sent her a single white iris through his page with a folded note that read, "Tonight, my heart finally arrives home." She had believed every word. Then the cathedral bells had rung the wrong sequence, the summons of revelation, a tone so old most living wolves had never heard it struck. The bells that meant a fated mate had been discovered inside the cathedral walls. The girl had been found in the kitchens, a scullery maid, brought in that morning to help with the feast. Caithon had walked past her, and the mark had ignited on both of them at once. True mates. The pale light had spoken, and Marin Vosserel, with her 300 mountain pearls and her 4 years of preparation, had become an obstacle. "I released the Lady Marin from her contract," Caithon said now, his voice carrying through the cathedral. He did not look toward the alcoves. He looked nowhere except at the dazed girl beside him. "Her family's honor remains untouched. Her dowry is returned in full. The fault lies with no one. The light does what the light does." A polite, sympathetic murmur rippled through the pews. Several elder mothers nodded gravely. One of them even smiled. Marin felt her breath leave in pieces. She was being pitied, publicly, in front of every house that had ever measured her worth. The fault lies with no one, as if she had been a flaw in a contract that fate had quietly corrected. She lowered her gaze to the betrothal ring on her finger, a pale blue diamond cut in the shape of a crescent. Caithon had told her, the night he gave it to her, that he had chosen the cut himself because it reminded him of the curve of her smile. He had loved her. She knew he had loved her. She had felt it in the marrow, in the breath, in the place where the soul keeps its small secret fires. But the pale light had spoken, and a fated mate could not be refused. To deny the mark was to invite a slow unraveling of the soul. Every wolf in the cathedral knew this. Every wolf in the cathedral had just watched their prince do the only thing he could. She was not betrayed. She was simply replaced. A sound escaped her throat. halfway between a sob and a laugh, and she pressed her forehead against the cold pillar. Then she felt it. A presence. From the high gallery on the eastern side. Heavy. Deliberately aware. Her skin prickled before she lifted her eyes. The eastern gallery was reserved for foreign dignitaries. 3 figures stood at its rail, and 2 of them she did not recognize. The third was looking directly at her. He was tall, dressed in the deep storm gray of the northern reach. A heavy fur lay across one shoulder. His hair was the color of cold iron, cropped short, and even from this distance she could see the brutal scar that ran from his left temple down to the edge of his jaw. She knew him. Every wolf in this cathedral knew him, the one alpha who had refused to bow to Silverhold. The one rival the Dreverin line had never managed to break. Varin Holch, the Iron King of the Northern Reach. He had been invited to the wedding as a gesture of forced peace, and he had come against everyone's expectation, alone. His eyes, pale as winter's sky and just as merciless, held hers across the burning cathedral. He inclined his head. Not in pity, not in apology, in acknowledgement. As if he had just witnessed something the rest of the cathedral had missed. Marin began, very slowly, to think. If the pale light could choose for Cathon, then it could choose for her. And if it would not choose, then she would. She slid the betrothal ring from her finger. The pale blue crescent caught the candlelight one last time. She set it on the marble floor of the alcove, where someone would eventually find it. Then she rose in her ruined wedding gown and slipped backward into the dark. The cathedral's outer cloister was cold enough to fog her breath. Marin moved along the eastern wall, keeping to the shadows of the colonnade. Her hem dragged through frost. The pearls clicked softly with every step, and she cursed each one of them. Behind her, the wedding march had begun. The wrong wedding march, played for the wrong bride, while she walked away with no one yet aware she had gone. Her parents would still be in their seats. Her younger brother, her grandmother, who had not left the family estate in 11 years and had traveled 300 leagues to see her married. She could not face them. Not yet. The cloister opened onto the carriage yard, and she paused in the deepest shadow. She had no plan. She had 1,000 silver crowns sewn into the lining of her wedding cloak, because her grandmother had insisted no bride should travel without her own coin. She had a sapphire pin in her hair worth a small horse. She had 2 strong legs and a tongue that knew 6 languages, and a name that, until tonight, had carried weight in every house of the 4 quarters. The name would still carry weight, but it would now carry weight of a different kind. The girl Cathon released. The bride, the pale light unmade. A footnote in drawing rooms for the next 20 years. Unless she became something else first. She thought of the man in the Eastern Gallery, the Iron King, the one wolf in the realm who hated Cathon Drevarin enough to take pleasure in his rival's leftover bride. The thought should have horrified her. It did not. What horrified her was the small electric coil of clarity that had begun to unwind in her chest from the moment his eyes had met hers, as if he had been waiting for her to look up, as if he had known, before she did, that she would. She did not love him. She did not even know him beyond the stories. She had heard since girlhood that he was cruel, that he had killed his own uncle to take the throne that the scar had been given to him by his first wife in the moment before he ended her life. She did not know which stories were true, but every story agreed on one thing. Varin Holch was the one alpha in the realm whom Cathon Drevarin could not overrule. And Marin Vossarel had just been overruled in front of 2,000 people. A figure was crossing the carriage yard, not toward her, toward the eastern gate. A tall figure in storm gray, fur across one shoulder, walking with the controlled stride of a man who had never been in a hurry. He was leaving. The feast had not yet begun. The vows had not even fully concluded. He was walking out before anyone could note his departure. She gathered her ruined skirts and ran. The Iron King reached the gate before she did. A black carriage waited there. No crest, no driver in livery, only one heavy-shouldered man on the bench holding the reins of two enormous black horses. He set one boot on the carriage step. Wait. Her own voice. Hoarse. He paused. He did not turn around immediately. He simply held very still, one hand on the carriage door, and let the silence sit. Then, slowly, he looked back over his shoulder. His eyes found her in the dark of the carriage yard. They did not widen, did not narrow. He had been expecting this. He had been expecting her. "Lady Vassarel," he said. His voice was lower than she had imagined, quieter. "You should be inside. I should be many things tonight. None of them are happening." The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. Something colder and more interested. "What do you want from me?" She lifted her chin. The wind tore her veil half loose from her hair. She did not reach to fix it. "You came here tonight knowing he would humiliate me. Did you not?" A long pause. "I came tonight," he said carefully, knowing that the pale light had been helped to speak. The words struck her like a cold hand laid against her chest. "What did you say?" He did not repeat himself. He simply watched her, and in his pale eyes she saw the first true thing she had encountered all night. He believed the bond on the dais was a lie. "I do not know you," she said, her voice steadied by force. "I do not know if half the things they say of you are true, but I know this. I will not go back into that cathedral. Not tonight. Not ever. And I will not stand in any drawing room for the next 30 years and let people pity me for what was done here." The Iron King looked at her for a long moment. "What are you proposing, Lady Vassarel?" "That you take me with you." The wind moved through the carriage yard. Behind them, the cathedral bells rang the conclusion of vows. The bond was sealed. Cathon Dravarin was a married man. "Do you understand what you are asking?" "Yes." "I do not think you do." "Then explain it to me on the road." A muscle moved in his jaw. The scar caught the lantern light. "Get in the carriage," he said. She climbed in. The door shut. The black horses pulled away. As the carriage cleared the eastern gate and turned north, Marin did not look back. She did not see her grandmother emerge from the cathedral steps a moment later, calling her name. She did not see Cathon Dravarin, on the dais, with his new bride's hand still in his, suddenly turn his head toward the eastern gate as if he had felt something pass through the air and be gone. His eyes, when they found the empty alcove behind the third western pillar, were not the eyes of a man who had just chosen. They were the eyes of a man who had just realized something had been taken from him while he was not looking. 6 weeks passed before the rest of the realm understood what had happened. By the time rumor reached the river cities, Marin had been living in the fortress of Crealhadrin for over a month. Crealhadrin was nothing like Silverhold. Silverhold had been pale stone and high windows and gardens spilling jasmine over every balcony. This place was black basalt cut from the bones of the mountain it stood on, and the wind never stopped moving through its corridors. The windows were narrow as a sword's edge. What grew here grew in inner courtyards under stretched canvas, hard and small and useful, never beautiful. She had been given a room in the western tower. The Iron King had walked her to it himself the night they arrived, said only, "This door has a lock, and you hold the only key," and left. She had not seen him for 3 days. On the 4th, a woman had brought her clothes. Not gowns, trousers, tunics, a heavy fur-lined coat, knee-high boots. The woman introduced herself as Heska, the keeper of the Western Tower, and said in a voice that would have cut iron, "The king says you are not a prisoner. The king says you may walk where you wish. Lift your arms." Marin had lifted her arms. Heska had measured her with a length of waxed cord, nodded once, and left. In the weeks that followed, Marin learned the fortress the way one learns a difficult language. The library was enormous. The Great Hall hosted council 3 nights of every week, and she was not invited. She had not asked to be invited. She had been thinking. The pale light had been helped to speak. She had asked Heska on the 15th day what those words could possibly mean. Heska had set down her tray. Ask the king, when he is ready to be asked. So Marin had waited. She did not love Varin Hulch. She did not yet know if she could like him. But the few times she saw him in the corridors, he nodded with grave courtesy and kept moving, as if he understood that what had passed between them in the carriage yard was not a courtship and would not be turned into one without her invitation. She had begun, slowly, to respect him. He had not touched her. He had not paraded her in front of his court. The only ones who knew she was there were the household staff, the inner guard, and 3 council members sworn to silence on pain of execution. He was protecting her, she realized on the 23rd day, from the moment the news broke. Because the news would break. On the 43rd day, a rider came up the mountain in a snowstorm. Marin was in the library when she heard the horn. From the high window she watched the rider dismount. Silver-hulled livery, silver and pale blue, a sealed scroll case at his hip. Heska found her in the corridor a few minutes later. The king has summoned you. The council chamber was a long room with a black stone table, 3 council members, Varin at the head. He rose when she entered, which surprised her. Lady Vossarel, a letter has arrived. He gestured to the parchment laid open on the table. She walked the length of the chamber, picked it up, and read. The seal was Silverhold's. The hand was Cathon's. To His Majesty Varin Hulch, it has come to our attention that a member of our household, the Lady Marin Vossarel, may have traveled north. Her family is in great distress. Her grandmother has fallen ill. The realm has been told she has gone south to visit relatives, and we should very much like that explanation to remain the truth. We trust you will see her safely returned within 30 days. Cathon Dravarin, Alpha King of the Silverhold Throne. She read it twice, set it down. My grandmother is not ill. No, Varin agreed. He wants me back to manage the story. Yes, he is afraid of what people will think when they realize I am here. He should be. The 3 council members watched her with a careful, neutral attention. Before I answer him, she said, I would like you to tell me what you meant in the carriage yard, about the light being helped. The chamber went still. The 3 council members did not move. Whatever Varin had been carrying about that night, he had been carrying it alone. There is a woman alive in the southern marshes, Lady Vossarel, he said quietly, who is paid to make false mate bonds. She is paid by a particular house, for a particular purpose, and she has been paid before. 3 times in the last 20 years that I know of. He paused. The most recent payment was made 11 days before your wedding. 4,000 silver crowns. The contract is in my possession. I obtained it the day before I came south. Her hand began very faintly to shake. Whose seal is on the contract? He did not look away from her. It is not Cathon's. It is his mother's. He took her to the lowest level of the fortress that same night. The stairs went down a long way, past the kitchens, past the wine cellars, past a level she had not known existed where the air smelled of old stone and iron. At the bottom, a plain wooden door stood barred with 3 iron locks. He unlocked them himself with 3 different keys he wore on a chain inside his coat. Inside was a cell, clean, well kept, a narrow bed, a writing table, a basin, a small high window that let in a single thin shaft of cold daylight. A woman sat on the bed, perhaps 50, iron gray hair, cropped short, a simple wool dress, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, when they lifted, were the most striking thing about her. Tired, sharp, entirely awake. She looked at Varin. then at Marin. Something shifted in her face, almost relief. You found her. She found me, Varen answered. The woman nodded slowly. Of course she did. Marin stepped into the cell. Esmira of the Black Reed, Varen said quietly. The woman who forged your bond. Marin's heartbeat went still. She had imagined the bond rite 100 times. A witch with stained hands. A hag in a swamp. Not this. A weary, ordinary-looking woman with the eyes of someone who had made her peace with what she had done. How long has she been here? 26 days. The Queen Mother had ordered her killed. We reached her first. Marin looked at the woman on the bed. Why? Esmira regarded her for a long moment. For 4,000 silver crowns, Lady Vosserel, which is enough to feed a marshlands village for 9 years, which is enough to keep my own daughter alive, who was a hostage in the Queen Mother's southern lodge. She threatened your daughter. She has done it before, to others. There are 11 other women in the southern marshes whose families have been ransomed in this manner. None of us know each other. Each of us has done a piece of work for the Queen Mother over the years. What kind of work? False bonds? Forgeries? Some smaller, some larger. A bond of loyalty placed on a council member who would not otherwise have voted as she wished. A bond of revulsion placed on a young lord about to marry a girl she disliked. A bond of grief placed on a widow so she would not remarry. Smaller. Harder to detect. There for years. Esmira's tired eyes met hers. Yours was the largest. Yours was the one she has been planning since the day your betrothal was announced. She did not believe you suitable for her son. She did not say why, even to me, but she paid in full. The floor moved very faintly under Marin's boots. 4 years. The Queen Mother had begun planning Marin's destruction in the very week her betrothal had been announced, while she was writing letters of welcome, while she was kissing her on the cheek, while she was calling her, my dear Marin. Why have you not killed her, Your Majesty? Marin asked. Her voice was steady but barely. You have what you need. The contract. Her testimony. Why is she still alive? Varen answered very quietly. Because she is the only person alive who can break the bond on Caithon Dreverin. Marin turned her head slowly. He held her gaze. The forgery is killing him, Marin. It will kill him within 6 months. The bond will hollow him faster than a natural one because his soul is fighting it. His mother is already running the kingdom in his absence. If we do nothing, your former betrothed dies in the spring, and his mother becomes the unchallenged ruler of the southern half of the realm. He took 1 step closer. I did not bring you here to tell you what to do. I brought you here because the choice in front of us is not mine to make alone. You are the one who was wronged. You are the one who walked out of that cathedral. If we move against the Queen Mother, we will need you. If we save Caithon, we will need you more. It was the first time he had said her name without the title. She did not move. She thought about the alcove, about the candle standing perfectly still as if time itself had stopped, about the veil her grandmother's seamstress had spent 9 months embroidering, about Caithon's face, dazed and glassy, his hand on the wrist of a girl who had not asked for any of this either. She thought about the 11 other women. She opened her eyes. Then we save him, she said. We break the bond. We let him live. We let him face what his mother has done in his name. And then we make her answer for it. Varen looked at her for a long moment. Something behind the careful courtesy had shifted, like a door opening a fraction in a room she had not been allowed into. That is not the answer of a woman who is broken, Lady Vosserel. No. She held his gaze. And from now on, Your Majesty, you will please call me Marin. Behind them, the bond right on the bed made a sound that was almost a laugh. The first laugh that had passed her lips in years. The laugh of a woman who had spent her life watching other women lose, and who had just, against all expectation, watched one win the first round. A second letter arrived 3 days later. This one was not from Cathon. The seal was a pale crescent with 7 smaller stars around it. The Queen Mother's seal. Marin had seen it on 100 letters in her lifetime. Lady Othen had written to her personally on her 16th birthday, welcoming her into the family. "My dear Marin," that letter had said, "no daughter could be more beloved than you already are to us." Marin opened the new letter at the council table with Varin beside her, and she read it without expression. "To the Lady Marin Vosserel, my dearest child, we have been told you have taken refuge with the Iron King. We do not pretend to understand what circumstances have brought you to such a place, but we beg you, in the name of the love we bore you for 4 years and bear for you still, to return at once. The realm has been informed you traveled south to attend your ailing grandmother. This story has been protected at considerable cost. It will continue to hold only if you return within the next 20 days. You are not in disgrace." The pale light moved as the pale light willed. None of us bear fault. There are houses already inquiring about your hand. You have not lost your future. You have only had it redirected. But if you remain with the Iron King, my child, you will lose all of it. He is not a man who shelters women out of kindness. Whatever he has told you, whatever he has promised you, I beg you to consider what use he intends to make of you. Consider what story he is preparing to tell. You have known me as a mother. I write to you now as one. Come home. Othen Dreverin." Marin read it twice. She thought of the 4,000 silver crowns. She thought of the 11 women. She thought of Cathon dying by inches in a southern lodge. Then she lifted her eyes to Varin. She will be expecting an answer. "Yes, I would like to write it myself. It is yours to write." Marin took up the pen. She wrote 3 lines. She sealed them with the small wax stamp Heska had left on her desk in her second week. The personal seal the household of the Reach had quietly issued to her without ever having been asked. An unmarked silver crescent. She handed the sealed letter back to Varin without showing him the contents. "Send it by the slowest rider you have. I want her to read it on the 17th day." "Why?" "Because by then we will already be at the Southern Lodge, and by then it will already be too late for her to stop us." Varin's pale eyes did not leave her face. "What did you write, Marin?" she told him. "I am no longer your daughter. I know what was paid, to whom, and on what date. The contract is no longer in the marshes. It is in safekeeping where you cannot reach it. Your son is dying because of you. If you do not break what you have bought, you will be the woman who killed the Dreverin line with her own hand." Varin looked at her for a long, still moment. "You did not warn me you were going to say that. You did not ask." "Marin." "Yes. Did you mean every word?" "Every word." A pause. "Then we have a great deal of work to do, because the Queen Mother will not break what she has bought. She will burn the Reach to the ground first. Then we ride before she can." He nodded once. The plan took 2 days to build. They could not enter Silverhold. The capital was already fortifying. But the Southern Lodge, where Cathon was in seclusion, was lightly guarded by the Queen Mother's standards, because she believed her son was already finished, and a finished man does not need protection. Reach the lodge first, break the bond before Cathon could be moved or eliminated, save the man. Then take him, and the bond right, and the contract north, to the Council of Elder Mothers. The only court the Queen Mother could not buy. The plan assumed Cathon would consent to be saved by his rival. Marin was less sure of that than Varin appeared to be. They rode out at dawn on the 3rd morning. 40 riders, Varin at the front, Marin beside him on a black mare named Surette. The bond right in the middle of the column under the watch of 4 guards. The contract sealed in a leather case at Varin's saddle, locked, with the only key around his neck. They rode for 4 days. He spoke more on the road than he had in the fortress. of practical things, the terrain of the high passes, the names of the smaller villages they passed through, the history of the Reach, which she had never been taught in any of the Silverhold tutoring rooms. On the third evening, by a small fire in a high pass, she asked him about the scar. He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "A border raid when I was 22. Not a wife. Not a duel. A child of 9 years who threw a rock at my face because I had killed her father. Her father had been selling northern children into the southern markets. He had sold my own sister the year before. The girl did not know that. She only knew her father was dead. Did you punish her? I gave her my horse and a letter to my own household, asking them to feed her until she chose what to do next. She lives in the Reach still. She is married. She has 3 sons. She does not speak to me, but she sends a single letter every spring on the day I executed her father, asking after my health." Marin was silent for a long time. "Why do you let the Southern stories say it was your wife? Because the truth is my sister's, not mine, and because I would rather be feared for a wife I never had than known for a sister I could not save." She looked at him across the fire. "You are not what they say you are." "No, I am not what they say I am either." "I know." She did not look away. "I am beginning to understand why I walked out of that cathedral toward you." He looked back at her. "And I am beginning to understand," he said quietly, "why I came south at all." Neither of them said anything more for a long time, but when she rose to go to her bedroll, he rose with her and walked her the small distance to her tent, and at the flap he paused, and she paused with him, and he lifted one gloved hand and brushed a strand of hair from her temple with the back of his knuckle. It was the first time he had touched her. He did not lean in. He did not ask for more. He simply held that small gesture for a breath, and then let his hand fall, and bowed the small, precise bow of the northern court, and turned away into the dark. She stood at the flap of her tent for a long moment after he had gone. Then she went inside, and she lay down, and she did not sleep for a long time, and when she did sleep, she did not dream of Cathon. The southern lodge sat half hidden in a stand of cedar. Varen's people had done this kind of work before. The perimeter guards were taken in silence. The interior guards were harder. 2 died, and one of his own took an arrow through the shoulder before the lodge fell quiet. Varen met her at the door. Blood on the cuff of his coat that was not his own. His face very still. "He is in the western chambers. Alive. Conscious. Alone. The girl Sirith is in the eastern wing. Sedated. We will deal with her after." "Alone?" His attendants ran. He did not. "He is sitting up in bed waiting for us. He felt us coming, I think. He has not called for help." Marin nodded. She walked the long corridor with Varen beside her and Esmira 2 paces behind. At the door of the western chamber she stopped. She had not seen Cathon's face since the cathedral. "You do not have to go in alone," Varen said quietly. "Yes, I do." She opened the door. Cathon was sitting up in the high bed, propped against the dark wood of the headboard. He was thinner than she had ever seen him. His skin was the color of wax. His eyes, the eyes she had spent 4 years memorizing, were sunk deep in shadow. His hands lay open on the coverlet, palms up, as if he had stopped trying to hold anything. He looked at her. His mouth opened, and he said, in a voice so cracked it was barely a voice at all, "Marin." It was the first time he had said her name aloud since the cathedral. She knew, with a certainty she could not have explained, that it was the first time. He had not been able to before. The bond would not have let him. The fact that he could now meant the bond was already weakening, or that something inside him had finally fought its way through. Cathon. She did not move from the doorway. "You came," he whispered. "I came." "Why?" She could not answer. Her throat had closed around something she did not have a name for. The 4 years sat in the room with them like a third person. "There is a woman with me," she said finally. "She is the one who made the bond. She can break it. Do you understand what I am saying?" His eyes filled with tears. Slowly, without sound. "I have been," he said, letting it take me quietly. Her breath stopped. I knew. Not at first. At first I believed it. I believed every part of it. But after a few weeks I began to see. And then I knew. And I could not say it. Because the bond would not let me say it. And I could not write it. And I could not leave. And so I have been sitting here, letting it take me, because that was the only door it would let me open. He paused. "My mother." It was not a question. "Yes." A long, terrible sound came out of him. Not a sob. Something older than a sob. "I am so sorry. Marion. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." She crossed the room in 3 steps and took his open hand in both of hers, and she held it. And she did not say it was all right. And she did not say she forgave him, because she had not yet decided what forgiveness even meant, and she did not say she still loved him, because she did not know whether she did. She only held his hand. He held hers back, with what little strength he had left. Esmera worked for 9 hours. Marin sat in a chair beside the bed for most of it. Esmera's craft did not look like magic. There was no chanting, no fire, and no smoke. She worked with her hands, very slowly, over the body on the bed. She traced lines in the air above his skin that Marin could not quite see but could feel, faintly, the way one feels a draft from a door opening in another room. Cathon's breathing slowed, then quickened, then slowed again. His back arched once. Near the 4th hour he began to weep without waking. Esmera murmured something in a language Marin did not know, very soft, almost a lullaby, and the weeping went on for an hour and then stopped. In the 9th hour, Esmera spoke a final word and pressed both her palms flat against his chest, and something invisible left the room. Marin felt it go, the way one feels the change in the air after a storm has passed. Cathon opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling for a long time, then he turned his head and found her. "It is gone," he whispered. "Yes. All of it?" "All of it, Your Majesty," Esmera said from the foot of the bed. He closed his eyes again. "Thank you." It was not clear, even to Marin, who he was thanking. He slept for 14 hours. In the morning, Varen's people moved the household. The girl Sireth was woken from her sedation. Esmera spoke with her alone. Marin did not know what passed between them. She did know that when Esmera emerged, her eyes were wet, and that Sireth, in the days that followed, did not ask to see Cathon and did not ask to be returned to Silverhold. She had been 16, Marin learned later, when the Queen Mother's people had bought her from an indenture house in the Reedlands. She had been told she would be a chambermaid. She had not understood, until the night of the cathedral, that she had been bought to be a vessel. That afternoon, Cathon asked to speak to her. He was sitting up. He had eaten. Some color had returned. He looked for the first time since the cathedral like the man Marin had known at 18. She sat in the chair beside the bed. "Marin, I need to say several things." "May I?" "Yes." "I knew, on some level, before the cathedral, that my mother did not want you. I did not know what she was capable of. I should have been protecting you. I should have known a woman who writes warm letters and speaks cold words to her own son in private is a woman to be afraid of. I was not afraid of her. I am ashamed of that." He paused. "The bond when it took me was not love. I know that now. It was something that walked into the cathedral and put on the costume of love, and I was not strong enough to see the costume from the inside. Every word I said to that girl in 6 weeks was a word my body said, while my soul was screaming somewhere else. I do not blame her. My mother did this. I did this. By being the kind of son who let his mother grow into the kind of woman who could do this. He swallowed. I do not ask you to come back. The words were spoken so quietly that for a moment she was not certain he had said them. I do not ask you, he repeated, to come back. I do not have the right. And there is another reason. He looked at her then. I saw you walk out of the cathedral, Marin. I felt you go. I could not turn my head, but I felt it. And in the 4 days after the bond first started to weaken, the first thing I could see clearly was your face in the alcove, and the second thing I could see clearly was the man in the eastern gallery, and the third thing I could see clearly was the look on your face when his eyes met yours. His own eyes were dry now. Steady. You have already chosen, Marin. I do not believe you knew it that night. I do not believe you have fully said it to yourself even now. But I saw it, with the very last clean piece of me that the bond had not yet reached. You walked out of that cathedral, and the world went with you, and the man in the gallery understood it before any of us did. I will not stand in the way of what you are walking toward. He paused. Be free, Marin. She did not realize until she felt the wet on her cheek that she had begun to cry. Cathon. Yes. You loved me, with everything I had, and I loved you. I know. Some part of me will always love some part of you. I know. But I am not coming back. I know. She rose. She crossed to the bed. She bent. She kissed him, once, on the forehead. The way one kisses a brother. The way one kisses the past. He closed his eyes. She left the room. Varen was in the corridor. He did not ask. He did not look at her face for any sign. He simply turned and walked beside her, the half step behind that he always kept when he was uncertain of his welcome. When they reached the courtyard and the cold air of the southern dusk had hit her face, she stopped and turned and looked at him. Varen. It was the first time she had used his name. His pale eyes did not move from her face. Yes. I have something to say to you, and I am going to say it badly. The corner of his mouth moved very faintly. The first small ghost of a smile she had ever seen. Then say it badly. I do not know yet if I love you. I have known you for 50 days. I have not been a free woman for any of them until tonight. I do not yet know who I am when I am not someone's daughter or someone's bride or someone's discarded story. But I walked out of that cathedral toward you. I did not know I was doing it. You did. And every day I have spent in your fortress, I have become more myself, and not less. I am not asking you to wait for me to know what it is. I am asking you to walk into it with me, and find out what it is together. On the road, the way you said the first night, Varen Hulch, the Iron King of the Northern Reach, looked at her for a long moment in the dusk of the southern courtyard. Then he did something he had not done in 11 years. He bent his knee. He went down to one knee in front of her in the dirt of the lodge courtyard, and he took her hand, the bare hand without a ring, and he pressed his forehead to her knuckles, and he stayed there for a long moment without speaking. When he rose, his pale eyes were wet, and Marin, who had thought she had no more crying left in her, found that she did, and that this kind of crying did not feel like ruin at all. He kissed her then. Not like a man laying claim, like a man asking permission. His hand came up to cup the side of her jaw, and his mouth found hers slowly, and she tasted, for the first time in her life, what it was to be kissed by a man who did not believe she belonged to anyone but herself. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Marin. Yes, I will spend the rest of my life walking that road with you. If you will have me, I will have you. Even before the wedding? There will be a wedding when there is a wedding. I am claiming you tonight, in this courtyard, in front of no priest and no council and no light. Will that hold you? His hand tightened on her jaw. It will hold me until the bones go out of me. Then it is done. She kissed him this time, and this time he did not ask permission. Heska's letter reached them on the road north on the third evening. A gray bird out of the high country, its message bound to its leg in a thin scroll. Varen read it by the firelight and his face went very still. He passed it to Meryn without speaking. My king, 3,000 men in Silverhold colors arrived at the southern wall the day after you left. They have not attacked. They are encamped. They wait. A second force of 2,000 is reported on the Western Pass, 6 days out. The Queen Mother has not stayed in the capital. She rides at the head of the second column herself. She is coming for you in person. She means to take Krail Hadron, and she means to take what you carry. The wall will hold for 10 days. After that, I cannot promise. Heska. Meryn read it twice. She is riding herself. Yes. She has never ridden to war. No. Why now? Varen did not answer immediately. He looked into the fire. Because the contract is on a horse, he said, and the bond right is on a horse. And her son is on a horse. And you are on a horse. And every one of those horses is moving toward the only court she cannot buy. She has already lost the war if we reach the hollow. The only move left to her is to take us on the road before we get there. How many men does she have at the western column? 2,000. And we have 40 riders, and a sick king, and a bond right, and a girl from the Reedlands. Yes. Then we cannot ride straight. No. Cirith had come north with them, quietly, in the back of the column. She had asked, and Varen had nodded, and a horse had been found. She had ridden the 4 days without asking for anything. Now, at the fire, she lifted her head for the first time and spoke. Your Majesty. Varen turned. Yes. I have been quiet because I did not know what I had to give, but I know the Western Pass. I was sold through it, 6 years ago. I crossed it on foot. There is a hunter trail along the southern face of the pass that goes around the throat of the throat where any army would have to bottleneck. It is a hard trail. A horse can take it if the horse is led. There were perhaps 5 people in the realm who knew of it when I was small. I do not know how many know now, but I know the trail. The fire crackled. Varen looked at her for a long moment. How many days does it cut? 3. Possibly 4. It will put us behind her column instead of in front of it. She will be looking for us ahead. We will be at her back. Varen turned to Ismira. Bond right. Yes, Your Majesty. Can you ride a horse on a hunter trail? I have done worse for less reason. Varen turned to Caithon, who was sitting wrapped in 2 cloaks against the cold, still thin, still recovering. And you? Caithon's voice was steady. I will ride wherever the lady leads. Varen turned finally to Meryn. His pale eyes held hers in the firelight. It is your call. The trail is dangerous. The straight road is also dangerous. We could turn aside. Send the bond right and the contract north under escort. Keep you and Caithon out of the path of the Queen Mother. The case can be made at the Hollow without you in person. It cannot, Meryn said quietly. No, the council will rule on a contract and a confession. They will not rule on a woman, and the woman is the part that turns the ruling into a verdict that holds. If I am not there, the southern houses will whisper for 40 years that I was hidden, that I was prevented from speaking, that I was never asked. I will not give them that whisper. I will stand in the hollow myself, and I will speak my own name, and they will not be able to deny it for 9 centuries. Varen nodded slowly. Then we take the trail. They turned west the next morning. Cirith rode at the front. It surprised Meryn to see her there. The girl from the Reedlands who had spoken perhaps 30 words since the Southern Lodge, but Cirith did not look surprised to find herself there. She rode the way Meryn had seen Heska work, with the quiet competence of a woman who had been told for too long that her hands were good only for the work of someone else. The trail was as bad as she had said. Worse, in places. They led the horses for 6 hours of every day. Varin did not let Marin lead her own. He took Surratt's bridle himself and walked the mare on the worst sections, with Marin behind him on a length of rope tied to her own belt for the parts where one slip would have been a 600-foot fall. She did not slip. On the third day, they came over the ridge above the western pass. The Queen Mother's column was below them. 2,000 men. Banners of pale blue and silver. The pale crescent of the Dreverin line with 7 smaller stars around it. Marin had grown up watching that banner fly over the towers of Silverhold every morning. She had once, at 11 years old, embroidered a smaller version of it for her own bedchamber. She did not feel anything when she saw it now. That was, she would later realize, the thing that mattered most. Not anger, not grief. Just the cold certainty of a woman who had finished being someone else's child. There, Cirith murmured, pointing. In the middle of the column, on a tall white horse, in a riding dress of dark silver-hulled blue, with her gray-streaked hair bound under a thin silver circlet, rode Othena Dreverin. Marin looked at her. She had not seen Otheni since the cathedral. She had spent 4 years of her life kissing this woman's cheek. She had spent 4 years of her life calling this woman mother. "How long until they pass below us?" Varin asked. 2 hours, then we go around them now. Quietly. The trail above this ridge holds for another half-day. We will be 3 days ahead of her by tomorrow night. Marin did not move. Varin. Yes, I want to speak to her. He turned his head sharply. No. Listen to me first. I am listening, but the answer is no. She is below us with 2,000 men. We are above her with 40. I am not asking you to go down. I am asking for one rider to go down under the white flag of parley, with a written message, asking her to ride up to the ridge alone. She will come. She believes she has me boxed. She will not be able to resist looking me in the face one more time before she takes me. And when she comes up the ridge, she will come into our hands. A long silence. And then she rides with us to the hollow, as our prisoner. She will stand in the chamber herself and answer for what she has done. The council will not have to rule on a contract. They will rule on her, in front of her, while she watches. That is a verdict no whisper can move. Varin looked at her, then at Esmera, then at Cathon, who had ridden up beside them silently and was looking down at his mother on the white horse with an expression Marin could not read. Cathon, Varin said. Yes, this is your house, your line, your mother. The council can rule without her in the chamber. We can take the contract and the bond right and your testimony and ride. Or we can do what Marin proposes, which puts every one of us at risk for the next 4 days, because she will not come up the ridge alone, and we will have to take her by force, and her men will pursue, and we will be running for our lives the whole way to the hollow. Speak. Cathon was quiet for a long time. When he answered, his voice did not shake. My mother spent 31 years making me afraid of her. I owe Marin every chance to look her in the face without flinching. And I owe myself the chance to stand in the same room as my mother one more time without being afraid. Take her. We will run for the hollow. We will get there. I will see this through. Varin turned back to Marion. Then we take her. Write your letter. Marin wrote it on a sheet of waxed paper, with the small wax stamp at her collar pressed into the seal, and a single rider went down the ridge under a strip of white cloth tied to a lance. And Otheni Dreverin read the message on horseback in front of her own commanders, and her face did not change, and she nodded once, and ordered her column to halt, and rode up the ridge alone. She did not come unarmed. They had not expected her to. But she came up alone, on her tall white horse, under a sky the color of cold iron, and she rode straight to the place where Marin stood beside Varin on the lip of the ridge, and she dismounted, And she looked at Marin, and she smiled. "My dear Marin, how thin you have become." Marin did not answer. "And the Iron King," Othen continued pleasantly, turning her head. "How clever of you to find a use for her. I always said, did I not, that she would make someone a very good wife? I had hoped it would be my son. I see I was unimaginative. Mother." Cathon's voice from behind Marin's shoulder. Othene's eyes went to him. For one moment, only one, something passed across her face that was not pleasant at all. Then it was gone. "My son, you look unwell. I am unwell. You made me unwell. What an unkind thing to say." Varen's voice was very quiet. "Lady Othen, by the authority of the case I have laid before the Council of Elder Mothers, by the seal on the contract you signed 11 days before your son's wedding, by the testimony of the bond-right Esmera of the Black Reed, and by the evidence of your own son's 9 hours of unbinding by the same bond-right, you are taken into custody to be brought before the Hollow of Listening. Your sword, please." Othen looked at him. She did not move. "I have 2,000 men on the road below," she said. "If I am not back at my horse by sundown, they will burn this ridge. They will burn your column. They will burn your bond-right, your son, and the woman you are evidently quite devoted to. You cannot take me without losing all of them. We will not lose them. You are 40 riders." "We will not lose them," Varen said again, "because you are not going to call to your men. You are going to mount your horse and you are going to ride with us, quietly, of your own apparent will, and your column will see you ride north up this ridge in their full sight, and they will assume you are doing what you have always done, which is moving faster than they can follow. By the time they understand you are not coming back, we will be 3 days into the high country and untouchable, and if I refuse, then I will kill you on this ridge and Esmera will testify in your absence, and the council will rule against your name without you. Either way, the Dravarin line ends in this hour. The choice you have is whether you ride to the Hollow alive." Othen looked at him. She looked at Cathon. She looked at Marion. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Othen lifted her chin, with the same elegance she had used to lift it for 31 years, and she said, very calmly, "I will ride with you. I would like the opportunity to speak in my own defense." "You will have it," Varen said. "At the Hollow. Marin." Marin did not turn her head. "Yes. You were a disappointment to me from the day of your betrothal. I want you to know that, before the council renders us all into history." Marin turned then, slowly. "I was not a disappointment to you, Lady Othen. I was a threat. There is a difference. A disappointment? You would have ignored. A threat? You spent 4,000 silver crowns to remove. You feared me. You feared what I would have brought into your son's house. You feared what kind of queen I would have made of him. And so you bought a forgery. I want you to know that, before the council renders us into history." Othena's pleasant face did not change, but her hands, at her sides, closed into fists. She mounted her horse without speaking again. They rode north up the ridge in full sight of her column, just as Varen had said, and her column watched her go, and assumed she was doing what she had always done, and the 4 days that followed were the hardest riding of Marin's life. But the column did not catch them. By the time the Queen Mother's commanders understood she was not coming back, the small party was gone into country that no 2,000-strong army could follow, and the Hollow of Listening was rising before them through a thin morning mist. The hollow did not look like a sanctuary at first. A wide, shallow valley between 2 pale stone ridges, with a shallow lake at its center, and a single low building of pale stone on the lake's northern shore. No spire, no bell. A single arched door of weathered wood. 7 narrow windows arranged in a curve along the southern face. There was no army around it, no guards, no banners, only the gray birds the sisters trained, perhaps 100 of them, circling lazily in the late morning air. Varin reined his horse at the head of the small column. From this point we walk. No weapons cross the threshold, no livery. We go in as petitioners. The party dismounted. Varin, Marin, Cathon, Sireth, Esmera, Othen, with her wrists bound, walking between two of the king's guards, her chin still high. The wooden door opened before they reached it. A very old woman stood in the threshold. Hair the color of cold ash, gray robes with no insignia of rank. Her eyes were milky with age. She was, Marin understood after a moment, completely blind. "You are 6?" the old woman said. "We are 6," Varin answered. "The petitioner. I am he. The wronged. I am she," Marin said. "The accused son. I am he. The witness instrument." "I am she," Esmera said quietly. "The false vessel." "I am she," Sirith said. The old woman's milky eyes turned somehow exactly toward the figure between the guards, and the maker of the forgery. A silence. Othen lifted her chin. "I am she. Enter." They crossed the threshold of the hollow of listening, and Marin felt, the moment her boot touched the inner stone, a cold prickling along the back of her neck. As if the room itself was breathing. Inside was a single round chamber with a domed ceiling and 7 narrow windows that let in 7 thin shafts of light. There was no altar, no throne, only a low semicircle of 7 plain wooden chairs along the southern curve of the room. 6 were occupied. The 7th, on the far left, was empty. The Council of Elder Mothers. The blind sister walked slowly to the empty 7th chair and sat. She was the 7th mother, the one who had opened the door, the one who would speak last. The eldest, a woman with deep brown skin and white hair coiled at the nape of her neck, lifted her chin. "State the case." Varin stepped forward. He spoke without raising his voice. He laid out the forgery, the contract, the bond right, the 11 women, the unbinding of Cathon, the ride, the Queen Mother's column, the bringing of her, in person, to this chamber. The eldest mother turned her head toward Othen. "You wish to speak." "I do." "Speak." Othen did not raise her voice either. That was, Marin would think afterward, the thing that surprised her most. Her former mother by betrothal stood in front of 7 elder mothers and the man she had tried to kill and the woman she had tried to erase, and she spoke as if she were addressing a dinner table. "I made the contract. I will not insult this council by denying it. The seal is mine. The hand is mine. The 4,000 silver crowns were paid out of my own private holdings. I do not deny any of it. Then you confess. I confess to the act. I do not confess to the wrongness of the act." A small ripple moved through the 6 other mothers. The eldest did not move. "Continue. My son was about to marry a woman who would have weakened the Dreverin line by alliance to a house that has been bleeding it dry for 40 years. The Vossarels are pleasant people. They are also quietly insolvent. The girl knew nothing of this. Her father knows. Her grandmother knows. The contract of marriage was to bring 12,000 crowns of dowry into our house, against 14,000 of our reserves promised to her family over the next 20 years. My son did not read the contract. I read the contract. I have been reading my son's contract since he was 6 years old, because he is a kind man and a careless one, and a kind, careless king ends a kingdom in 3 generations. She paused. I did not want my son's bride to be unhappy. I wanted her not to be his bride. I judged that the simplest and quietest route to that outcome was a forgery that no one would think to question, because no one in 9 centuries has thought to question the pale light. I judged correctly. The cathedral did not question. The realm did not question. My son did not question, until the bond began to eat him, which I had not intended and which I attempted, in the 3rd week, to slow. You attempted to slow it. Yes, I sent a healer to the southern lodge with instructions to keep him alive through the first 6 months. The healer arrived. The healer was prevented from doing her work by my son's own stubborn refusal to be touched by anyone but the false vessel. That, I confess, I did not predict. You predicted that your son would not love the woman you bound him to. I predicted that he would tolerate her, as one tolerates a difficult cousin at a holiday feast. I underestimated my son. He loved Marin. I thought he loved a portrait of her. I see now that he did not. That, also, I confess. She paused. What I will not confess is that I was wrong. The eldest mother's face did not move. Explain. The Draverin line is not stone. It is a slow-built thing made of contracts and alliances and small mercies extended over generations. My husband nearly destroyed it by marrying for affection. My son would have destroyed it by marrying for tenderness. The bondwright's craft was the smallest violence I could imagine that would prevent the larger violence of a kingdom's slow ruin. I am sorry for the 11 women. I am sorry for the girl from the Reedlands. I am sorry for the Lady Marin, whom I have always quite liked, and who I would have welcomed gladly into my home in any role except the one she was nearly given. I am even sorry for my son. But I will not stand in this chamber and pretend I would not do it again. She looked, then, directly at Marin. You will be a queen, child. I see that now. You will be a better queen than I ever was, because you will not be afraid of the things I have been afraid of. I expect you will rule the northern reach for 40 years and unite the 4 quarters before you are done. That is the future I bought when I paid 4,000 crowns for a forgery. I made you. I do not regret making you. I regret only that I did not see in time what I was making and stop. The chamber was very still. The eldest mother turned her head slowly to Marin. Wronged. Step forward. Marin stepped forward. You have heard her. I have heard her. You may answer. Marin looked at Othen for a long moment. She did not feel anger. She had thought she would. She felt, instead, the cold quiet of a woman who had finally been told the truth about something she had spent 4 years failing to understand. You did not make me, Lady Othen. You tried to unmake me. The thing that made me was the moment in the alcove when I decided not to die quietly. You were not in that moment. Varin was not in that moment. Cathon was not in that moment. I was alone, and I chose. The future you describe, if it comes, will not be your gift to me. It will be the consequence of you having failed to break me. I do not hate you for trying. I do not even particularly hate you. But I will not let you take credit for what I built out of what you tried to destroy. You did not make me. I made me. You only made the night I had to do it on. A long silence. The eldest mother nodded once. Spoken like a mother yourself, child. Step back. Marin stepped back. The 7 elder mothers sat in silence for what felt like a very long time. They did not confer. They simply sat, eyes half-lidded, each in her own breath. When the eldest mother finally spoke, her voice was lower, older, as if something had passed into her that had not been there a moment before. The council has heard. The council has weighed. The council has ruled. The forgery is named. The marriage of Alpha King Cathon Dravarin to Sereth of the Reedlands is annulled in this hour, in this chamber, in the name of the pale light, and may not be invoked again by any house, any court, or any tongue in the 4 quarters. Othena Dravarin is named in the act of forgery before the light. By the holy law of 9 centuries, her standing is broken. The council strips her in this hour of her name, of her bond to her own house, of her right to bear the title of Queen Mother, and of her right to the protection of the sisters. She is no longer of the pale light. She is no longer of the Dreverin line. She is no longer mother. The army raised in her name is commissioned in a name that no longer exists. It is dissolved by the council in this hour. Any commander who continues to wage war in her name is in defiance of the pale light and may be lawfully struck down by any hand in the four quarters. This ruling will be carried by the gray birds to every house, every garrison, and every elder council in the realm before the sun sets tomorrow. The bondwright Esmera of the Black Reed is judged to have acted under coercion. She is bound to a life of service to the 11 women whose bonds she helped to forge. Her hands are her penance, her freedom is her ransom. Cyrith of the Reedlands is judged without fault. She is restored to her name, her freedom, and recommended to the Eastern Sanctuary, where she may learn the work of healing if she so chooses. The Lady Marin Vosserel is judged to have been wronged in body and in name. The council declares her honor whole, and her future hers alone. Her testimony in this chamber is entered into the holy record, where it will stand for 9 centuries as a warning to any house that might ever again attempt to forge the light. The Iron King of the Northern Reach is named as the petitioner. The council acknowledges his service to the light. The southern siege at Crail Hadron is, from this hour, unlawful, and the men who carry it out have, until sundown tomorrow, to disperse without consequence. Othene, formerly Dreverin, will be conveyed to the Eastern Sanctuary, where she will live out the remainder of her days under the watch of the sisters. She will not communicate with her son. She will not communicate with her former house. She will not communicate with any party to this case. The light will be watching. A pause. And one further thing, son of the Dreverin line. Cathon lifted his head. Yes, mother, you have done a difficult thing today. The light has noted it. Go and rule with what is left of your courage. You will need every piece of it. Yes, mother. The hollow has spoken. Go in peace. Carry the ruling out. The 7 mothers, as one, lowered their heads and closed their eyes. The chamber was very still. Marin turned. She looked at Varin. He was looking at her. Neither of them spoke. They walked out together. Behind them, the gray birds rose from the ridges of the pale valley by the hundreds, and they scattered into the wind in every direction, carrying the ruling of the council to every corner of the 4 quarters, faster than any horse could run. By sundown the next day, the southern siege at Crail Hadron had dispersed. The western column had turned around the night before, when the gray bird carrying the ruling had reached its commanders, and a captain named Rewin had personally ridden 2 days back to the capital to inform the household that the woman they had served for 31 years was no longer the queen mother of anything. Othene, formerly Drevarin, would die in a cell at the Eastern Sanctuary 9 months later, of an illness the sisters did not name. She wrote 1 letter in those 9 months, addressed to Marin, asking for nothing. Marin read it once, in the western tower of Crail Hadron, and set it in the fire without answering. That, also, was a kind of mercy. The wedding, when it finally happened, was small. It happened in the spring, 6 months after the hollow. Marin had asked for the time. She had said she did not want to come into a marriage as a woman the realm was still talking about, and Varin had agreed without question. The 6 months had been spent quietly. She had ridden the Reach with him. She had met the Watchers in the high country. She had visited the 11 women the bondwright was now bound to serve, and she had sat with each of them, alone, and asked what they wanted for their next life. By the end of the 6 months, she had a small book of futures, and the household of Crail Hadron had begun, slowly, to make those futures real. Cyrith had gone to the Eastern Sanctuary. By the 3rd month, the sisters were saying quietly to one another that the girl had hands like a mother. She did not yet know it. They were not in a hurry to tell her. Cathon had returned to Silverhold. He had spoken, in the first season of his returned reign, of everything the council had named, and he had not softened any of it. The realm had been silent for a long time after. Most of the older houses had returned to court within the year. He wrote to Myron twice a year. Letters of news, not of feeling. Once, in the first winter, he wrote her a single line that was not news. "I am glad you are well," she wrote back after a month with a single line in answer. "I am glad you are alive." That was the shape, in the end, of what they had been. The wedding was held at Creil Hadrun in the inner courtyard. Heska had organized it. She had wanted a feast, and Varen had wanted a feast, and Marin had said only, very firmly, that she did not want pearls. Heska had nodded once and removed every pearl from the household stores for the season. Marin wore a long coat of dark green wool over a simple linen dress. Her hair was in the single thick braid. She did not wear a veil. She walked across the inner courtyard on the arm of her own grandmother, who had ridden up from the south the week before with the rest of the Vosserel household, and who had not, the entire journey, stopped smiling. Her father walked behind with her younger brother. They had forgiven her, slowly over the months, for not having let them be part of her decision. Varen stood under a pale stone arch at the far end of the courtyard, in the deep storm gray of his house, with the iron circlet on his brow. The vows were spoken without priests. He had asked her, weeks before, whether she wished for the sisters to officiate. She had thought about it for 2 days. She had said, finally, "No. I do not need the light to bind me. The light has been bound enough. We will bind ourselves." He had agreed without argument. So they spoke the vows themselves, in the inner courtyard, in the spring sun, and they did not promise eternity, because Marin did not believe in promising eternity. They promised honesty, they promised patience, they promised the road. On the road, the way you said the first night, she had told him in the courtyard of a southern lodge, and he had remembered, and so the vow was that, in the end, we walk the road together. We do not promise the ending of the road. We promise to walk it. He kissed her after the vow, and the household of Creil Hadron, which had been still for the entire ceremony, did not cheer. It did something better. It exhaled. As one body. As a wall finally settling down a weight it had been carrying for 11 years. When at last they climbed the spiral stairs of the western tower together, Marin paused at the door of her old room. Varen. Yes. You once said, in the carriage yard, that the woman who walks out of a cathedral on the night of her own ruin is the only kind of woman you would ever bend a knee to. I remember. Did you bend it because she was that kind of woman? A pause. I bent it, he said quietly, because she was you. She smiled slowly. She opened the door of the old room. The fire had been lit. A single white iris stood on the writing desk, the way it had every day for 6 months, replaced once a week by Heska, who had never said a word about it. She took Varen by the hand and drew him into the room and closed the door. The candle on the writing desk burned through the night and into the morning, and the white iris, by some small mercy of the fortress's draft, did not gutter once. The realm, in the seasons that followed, learned a new shape. The Northern Reach and the Silverhold throne signed a treaty of full peace in the 2nd year of the marriage. The treaty was negotiated personally by the King of Silverhold and the Queen of the Reach, who met 4 times that year on neutral ground in the river country, and who behaved toward each other with a careful public courtesy that the realm watched with great interest and learned slowly to respect. Marin and Varen had 3 children. The first arrived in the 4th year, the second in the 7th, the third in the 10th. They were raised in Creil Hadrun, in the way of the north, on horses, in the libraries, with the watchers, with Heska, with their grandmother on holidays. The eldest, a daughter, would one day sit at the head of the Northern Reach and would be remembered by historians as the queen who finally united the 4 quarters by a treaty no one believed possible. She would credit, in her own writings, 2 things for her ability to do it: the patience of her father and the clarity of her mother. The clarity of her mother had a beginning. She wrote about it once, in a private journal her own daughter would later release on the centenary of her death. I sat in the alcove, her mother had told her, and I watched him give my future to another woman, and I thought I would die. And then, very quietly, I thought, no, I will not die. I will choose. I will walk out of this cathedral, and I will choose, and I will keep choosing for the rest of my life. And at the end of it, I will not have been a woman things were done to. I will have been a woman who did. That was the moment, child. That was the only moment. Everything else came from it. In every cathedral of the realm, for 9 centuries afterward, when a bride walked the aisle, the sisters of the pale light would whisper a small prayer that no priest before that ruling had ever known to whisper. May she be the woman who chooses, and not the woman who is chosen. May the light wait for her, and not move ahead of her. May she walk out, if she must, and find the road. The prayer was called, in the records, the Prayer of Marin. It is still spoken today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.